My name is Rachael and welcome to the Magdala podcast. We at Magdala know from experience that pornography, masturbation, and other sexual addictions are not just a guy problem. The need for women to be accompanied in the journey towards healing from addiction has gone sorely unmet, and that's why we're here. Magdala exists as a space where women can find hope, healing, and freedom alongside each other from sexual addiction. Our goal is to supply you with support, community, and accountability. Here on the podcast, you'll find everything from testimonies to practical advice to dialogue about how to heal and live fully as a Catholic woman. Wherever you are in your journey, know that you're not alone, and we welcome you to this table.
Today we're going to talk about the good news
Of recovery.
the gospel truth about how you too can recover from porn.
I can't.
Too far? Too far?
Oh my gosh.
I swear I'm not an infomercial. I'm just really quirky.
Oh my word. Well, welcome, listeners. Welcome, quirky or not. I'm Rachael. I'm your host. You guys know who I am at this point. If you've listened to a podcast episode already, I'm that girl who's saying like and way too much. Yeah, no. But you might have listened to our past two episodes with Mary Jo Carney, who is super involved in Magdala and a good friend of mine. And the past few episodes have been us covering a breadth of topics while Mary Jo is here with me in person, in the Purse in Nashville, Tennessee. So recording at my kitchen table, coming to you live from the Kalaki kitchen table.
Oh, with our new fancy podcast equipment.
I know, but I feel like
Thank you, donors.
I feel like our but I feel like our sanity is just slowly dipping. Like I think our first episode we were like killing it. Second episode we were doing pretty good. This episode is a free for all.
Get ready, everyone.
Buckle up.
Because now we're so tired that anything could happen. And by anything, I mean anything that is relevant and appropriate to the topic.
Right. Which, yeah.
Could be anything.
It could be a lot.
Honestly.
It could be a lot of things.
Honestly.
But anyway, today we're going to be talking about, the good news of recovery. We're going to get into some of the more practical aspects of what you can do in recovery. Other than therapy and something like a support group like Magdala, which we will talk about and incorporate into our conversation. But kind of like I mentioned in the last episode, if you listen to it, which you should kind of as a precursor to this episode, last episode was a little more sobering, if you will. We talked about the kind of the anatomy of an addiction and what defines an addiction and kind of our cultural battle over defining pornography and other sexual compulsions as addictions. So if you listen to that episode, you know that we're trying to talk about not living under labels, living with labels, not letting labels define you. So the label of an addiction is only to help you develop a treatment plan or a recovery plan. Mary Jo put it really well in the last episode. But we're going to kind of get into what can that recovery plan look like. Both of us are recovered and had our own little journeys with that. And Mary Jo especially is super creative in her outlets. And so I love the ideas that she brings to the table when it comes to, you laugh at me. You are.
Talking me up.
You are very creative.
Here we go again.
You are. Oh, do go on. you are.
No, stop. I'm blushing.
I mean, but yes, there's a lot of creative outlets we can talk about. And even just hearing from other women and their experiences and what has helped them, we can throw some of that in there too. So anyway, scrolling, edit through my outline. Okay, so I guess we wanted to break this down, right? We wanted to break this down into a few different categories. You've got to recover.
Mind, body, spirit. What do you want to start with? You pick.
I'm thinking mind. Well, okay. I want to say a couple things first. In my own recovery, and I talked about this in another interview, is the spiritual for me kind of came first, right? So and I think everybody has a different order to their own recovery.
Definitely.
For me, I had spiritual agreements that I needed to break. I had wounds that I needed to address in a spiritual sense before the mind and body really clicked into place. So the spiritual side was like the first for me. I had like a really beautiful encounter with the Lord in adoration that, allowed me to experience a lot of healing. But that doesn't mean the story's over. So I just kind of wanted to give that disclaimer that the order is different for everybody. And when you get one down and you feel like you're in a good place with one, that doesn't mean everything's going to be fine. Like, I don't think many addictions are solved solely by therapy or solely by prayer or, like things like that. Like, or solely by physical discipline. Like, we have to have, all three, which is kind of what we're getting at. So let's start with mind.
Yeah, and I put these in this order, I'm realizing now, because that was the order that my recovery followed.
Interesting. So you're just defining everything by you.
Well, what can I say? I did write this outline.
I'm kidding. I'm pretty sure that's
subconsciously.
Like,
I did that.
I am recovery. Recovery is me. No. Like, but I think that's how we say it anyway in the Catholic world, right? We say mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
So I think you put it in that order too.
Yeah.
You went according to the Catholic verbiage.
That's right.
And that's nothing to be ashamed
I am the Vatican. Oh, one heresy to the next.
I am tradition. No, there's a great story of somebody questioning, I believe it was St. Paul VI, but I may be totally wrong. And if some, canonical history nerd wants to, pop into the comments and correct me, but somebody was questioning him on something. And they're like, well, tradition X, Y, and Z says, and he looks and he goes, my son, I am tradition.
Oh my gosh.
Mic drop.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, that has nothing to do with our conversation, but it's funny. Moving on. Okay, mind. What are some practical things you can do to recover mentally from addiction?
Yeah, so this is really important because if you listened to the last episode, we talked about the relationship between pornography addiction or any sexual compulsion and mental illness. Most often, it's just kind of like another feature of a mental illness that you are undergoing. Not always, but the good news is whether or not you just have pornography addiction or a sexual compulsion, or you have like a full-fledged clinical disorder, it doesn't even matter because pretty much everything you can do to help is going to assist in both of those scenarios.
Right.
And really, truly, only like a licensed mental health care professional, really someone with a doctoral degree, to be specific, can accurately like diagnose people with clinical mental disorders.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you're interested in that, a lot of people don't know this actually. Yeah. Most master's level clinicians, they are not able to like,
they have to have their diagnosis.
They're not, sometimes they can administer, different tests, like Minnesota multiphasic personality inventory. Like they might be able to administer an MMPI, but they can't actually score it. This has to be done by someone with a doctoral degree.
No, I knew that. Yeah, in the therapy practice I went to, like it doesn't mean master's level clinicians don't have extremely good equipment on what the diagnosis might be, but typically, they are scored and monitored by somebody. Who's
so actually, let's talk about it a little because sometimes when people initially decide I'm going to go for counseling, appropriately, they don't really know what the heck they're after.
Sure.
And I have sort of like advice that I would usually give people generally and based off of my experience.
Hit us with it.
I think that it's really good. To make your first stop in that journey a trustworthy Catholic psychologist. Mm-hmm. Someone that is Catholic and has a doctoral degree. And I'll tell you why. It's because someone with that doctoral degree has really been trained to see and know and understand all of the different conditions.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're probably going to be able to help you to find the right treatment more quickly. Mm-hmm. The one that's most appropriate for the problems that you have.
Sure.
Mentally and emotionally. Now, from there, if it also works for you to do therapy with them, you like their style and you want to keep that relationship ongoing, great. If not, if it's too expensive, if it's out of network, if it's not a great fit, personality-wise, then from there, at least you have that information about like what is your most appropriate diagnosis, and therefore what types of therapy are going to be most helpful to you. And from there, you can actually look for master's level clinicians who have a lot of experience with those kinds of therapy. So like, let's say, just as an example, let's say that I advise my friend, you should go first to a psychologist. She goes and he discovers you've got some traits of like obsessive compulsive disorder, and you have generalized anxiety. And I would recommend that you do like this specific therapy. I think you should do like CBT, and I think that you should do, let's say they have trauma as well, you should do some EMDR. Okay?
I was about to say EMDR.
And so this person with some anxiety, some trauma, some OCD is knowing now, okay, I need to look for someone that does EMDR and maybe CBT, and they go out and they're looking for therapists that are in their network, or maybe someone that's specialized in that approach. And now you're going to know what you're looking for just a little more easily. Whereas I'll be honest, this is my personal opinion, but the field of psychology, it's very easy for clinicians to take advantage of the fact that people don't know themselves. They don't know their conditions and dysfunctions very specifically, or in very clinical terms at least. And they really don't know like what kinds of therapies they need. Yeah. And they will just continue coming in week after week after week to you. And it's totally the responsibility of that clinician to help you out so that you don't have to be coming in. Therapy should never be like a lifelong venture unless you really truly have like a very like chronic clinical disorder that's just treatment resistant for some reason or another. That's not typical.
Right.
Typically, I think it's totally feasible for everyone. Even those with who have had chronic problems. That was certainly me. I had like 10 years or more worth of very heavy duty chronic dysfunction. And even I was able to do 2.5 years of counseling and a couple follow-ups, and
I think it's the willingness.
I haven't needed more.
Yeah, it's the willingness to take the advice you're receiving, do the work. Anybody who's been through a therapeutic process knows there's homework. There's serious homework involved. It's mental homework. Like when you mentioned CBT, for our listeners who don't know, that's cognitive behavioral therapy. Anybody who's gone through CBT knows that it's like learning to ride a bike. Like but in your own brain, like learning to reorient your responses to your own emotion. And sometimes that's been in place for decades.
Yes.
And so things like that in EMDR. But this is also why most counselors are very detailed in their biographies and talk about what they specialize in.
Yes.
Because they, so many of them want to be providing the service that you need. And then for those of our listeners who would look for a counselor who specializes in sex addiction, there's a few different ones, but CSAT is the typical clinical, like clinically trained sex addiction therapist. And it stands for clinical sex addiction therapist,
I think it's certified sex addiction therapist.
So that's somebody
CSAT.
who's already a licensed counselor. They are a licensed counselor. Then there's
at a minimum, it could also be someone who is a psychologist.
Yes.
And when I say a master's level clinician, I'm referring to a licensed mental health practitioner, or there's a lot of different letters for these. It's like LMHC, LMPC,
LMFT.
Yeah, LMFT. If you see somebody that's calling themselves a counselor or therapist and they have one of those, they're a master's level clinician, as opposed to someone with a PsyD or a PhD.
Doctor, And it's interesting. I like your opinion because I think it offers something different. That's not the path I took in my own therapeutic
it's not necessary for
but it's
success.
Helpful. Yeah.
But the way that I look at it, it's just a more streamlined process, because some women come to me and they say, I'm looking everywhere for like a good Catholic therapist or something, but I'm coming up empty handed. And I say, well, don't worry about that. if you know what kind of therapy you need and you find a clinician that respects your beliefs, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Because what happened in my case was that I had a really solid Catholic psychologist for the first year and a half. Mm-hmm. And then actually we reached the point with the particular therapeutic approach he was using with me. We reached the limits of his knowledge of that approach. And I was also in for a move. I moved to a different part of the country.
Yeah.
And I was able to find a master's level clinician who was licensed and certified in that particular therapeutic approach. And with him, we took that approach much deeper, and I learned a lot of wonderful things. And this guy was a fallen away Catholic who was into Zen Buddhism. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is so
right.
This is a very typical, I hate to say, but yeah, a fallen away Catholic who's into new agey stuff. This is very, I think it's a little typical in the psych world.
For sure.
But this man was so wonderful. He was a wonderful therapist. And he told me that he was, his religious affiliation as a matter of respect and as a matter of being forward and informing me of his background, which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
I loved everything about working with this man, and he really respected my beliefs, and we did great work together. So it's not necessary.
That's a great point.
That they be stamped with the seal of the Vatican in order for you to have a good experience with them.
Yeah.
I think the caveat with this topic is just that they really understand your sexual ethic, which is not the same as the rest of the world when you're Catholic.
And they have to be willing to respect that and not try to move you away from it. If you experience anything in a clinical counseling setting where it feels like they are trying to move you away from the teachings of the church on sexuality, you can hightail it. And that does happen. But typically, clinicians are extremely respectful of where you are. But I've heard of a few, situations where that wasn't the case. And so if you start to feel in your conscience that somebody's moving you away from that, then that's not the best clinical setting for you.
Trust your gut.
Absolutely. And there's other, with the letters, the good old credentials. There's a few others, like SATP is sex addiction therapy practitioner or provider. And that's what I'm in school to be, but that's not necessarily clinical, right? So I'm in it from a pastoral counseling setting, right? So I'm coming in with degrees in theology and from a ministry standpoint. So I can become a SATP and not be a licensed counselor. That doesn't mean I can do clinical therapy, not in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. But a lot of licensed counselors can seek out that certification as well for use in a clinical setting. Mm-hmm. So if you see SATP, make sure there's other letters before it, PsyD or PhD or LMFT or, several others.
If you're after therapy.
MS, so things like that.
To do that.
Yep. And you see the SATP, that is somebody who's trained in sex addiction. But there's several people, in my case, there's a lot of priests who pursue certifications in this or different things like that. There are people who pursue it just for professional development for ministry purposes. So that's something we can look for. And it's really cool that when I was looking for programs, a lot of places are developing programs specifically for pornography addiction and sex addiction in general, just recognizing what a pervasive problem this is. So a lot of counselors, I think, are really recognizing it, and some just choose it and God bless them as an area of specialty, and it's really incredibly powerful. And we have on the mind front, switching gears a little bit to the to accountability. This is definitely a mind thing.
The other huge part of the mind.
Oof.
The therapy is good, but you've got to also make it personal, and you have to tell someone that you can trust. Mm-hmm. And if you are able to tell a couple of your close friends, I mean, it's for the better.
For sure.
Depending on how they react. But if they're a good friend, a close friend, then it will be, it won't be a big deal. Yeah.
And there are some damaging experiences too with that it can be hard to come back from and tell another friend, my experiences telling friends were typically very good. But I've known several women whose friends or family respond with shock or disgust or different things that can be very wounding. And so, for any of our listeners who have had a bad experience when seeking accountability, I just, pray you have the trust to try again, because accountability is huge. And accountability will get its own episode. So many things will, but just maybe we can both say a couple words on like what made a good accountability partner for us and how did we find them?
Yeah. So when I, at the very beginning of my recovery, went cold turkey for a year with Covenant Eyes Accountability. This was a friend that I had made right at the beginning of school. And by the end of that year, actually our friendship like did not survive the year, sadly. We both were going through some incredibly difficult things in that time.
So you don't think it was related to the accountability aspect?
I don't think so. Although I'm sure that extra weight, it's possible it didn't help the situation.
Sure.
But she was the only friend at the time, at the beginning of that year, that I had felt comfortable to tell, because I knew she was a very faithful Catholic and I knew that she would want to help me. She herself did not understand the struggle because it had never been a problem for her before. And that was a little, in hindsight, I think that was a little hard for me, or made me feel a little alienated. But, she did want to help, and almost in like a fear-based motivation way, I was extra motivated not to screw up because of the fact that like she didn't, she wouldn't have understood it personally. And to see me slip up, she would have been probably like, oh boy, not again. I'm putting thoughts in her mind. I'm sure she would have been more gracious than that, but those were my perceptions at the time. So that was my first experience of accountability, actually, was with a friend that it did not survive the year, which is uncommon for me. But I was going through pornography addiction, was frankly at the time like one of the lesser demons of what I was going through at that time. And I have some friends that are still friends from that time in my life. And I have some that aren't. Yeah. And the ones that we are still good friends and close, tend to be the ones that knew how to put up the boundaries with me, because I was really going through like very, very clinical mental illness. So that was my first sort of accountability experience, which helped me go cold turkey. But again, that sort of like actual healing of the heart and long-term motivation for recovery, it became unpacked sort of like more after that year and as I went deeper into recovery. These days I have a fantastic accountability partner who's also a wonderful friend. And we've actually worked with each other, not just with like pornography or fantasizing or things, but also on other bad habits, like relationships with food, and things like that. Other things that we have just wanted to improve upon in our lives. Yeah. Even if truly neither of us are meeting like clinical criteria for dysfunction in these areas today, praise God.
But it doesn't mean there's not opportunity to refine.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're always asking that question. How can we, in the words of Pier Giorgio Frassati, like verso il cielo, reach for the heavens, verso l'alto, reach for the heights. That's very important to me and to her. And so we continue to challenge each other, in that way. That's probably like the ideal, like God has really blessed me in this. Like I have the ideal accountability, these days. And because I have some distance, from like active addiction, because I'm well into my recovery, and I'm able to do things like these podcasts and the ministry, like pornography isn't like such a scary thing to talk about in my friendships or family relationships, because I think people can see the fruit of it in my life. However, like more towards the beginning, yes, absolutely. That was very scary. Yeah. But yeah, almost always met with a lot of grace.
Yeah, I can't think of too many situations where
No, same.
I wasn't. I think I was met, with responses of like, oh, I didn't know girls struggled with that. Like I think that's the most extreme.
Yeah. Which is why it's part of why it's so important to go ahead and tell your close friends, because the world deserves to know that like we're not all like silent solo freaks. Like,
no.
This is like an issue.
Right.
This is a larger issue for women right now.
And normalize it a little bit. Yeah, I think the first time I told a friend was my senior year of high school, I believe. And I told my best friend in high school, and her response was very loving. She also didn't relate, but she was extremely loving and merciful. And it made it easier to tell other people in the future, like tracing back to her reaction. I did not have a formal accountability partner in my recovery, and that was very difficult. It was extremely tough not to have somebody that I could continually turn to. I did end up telling more friends, and I had more friends who knew. So I knew I could reach out to them for prayers, but I never had this formal accountability relationship until a couple of years ago, actually. So like kind of post recovery, or in I guess the freer years, I had a friend who she and I would keep each other accountable and in just our relationships, and we're both married to the people we were dating at the time now, but we just kept each other kind of accountable on our mindsets, on things like fantasizing or lust, and just the ways it was manifesting in our dating relationships or engagements. And that was really helpful. So, and she and I can still reach out to each other for prayer, or for understanding. And that was really beautiful. But recovering without that formal accountability relationship was something that's part of why I created Magdala.
It just doesn't happen without it.
Yeah.
Frankly.
And I think there's like a level to which those more informal friendships and them knowing it served almost as like accountability, and that did help me recover.
Definitely.
But yeah, I feel like upon reflection, it probably could have happened more quickly if I'd had, something more formal. And that's part of why Magdala exists.
Absolutely. So, no one should ever have to go through this alone. And frankly, when you try, that you will fail.
Yeah.
The accountability relationship has been where a lot of that creativity
that
you're talking about comes out. For example, one of my accountability partners, she realized that, like before bed was the trigger time. Sure. And she resolved to just sleep with the phone outside the room.
Yeah.
Never ever sleep with the phone within reach.
And
in order to hold me accountable to this, I asked her to send me a like pre-bedtime selfie every single night for a week. And it was fun because, she washes up her face, whatever, like she's wearing like a stupid towel on her head. And like, she just sent me like stupid selfies for a week, like mirror selfies, you know? She was like, I'm going to plug it into the bathroom. I'm going to leave it in the bathroom. So it's just like, little things like that you get creative, and you get so much closer, or if it's like, okay, this week, I want to ask something of you, like, will you send me, a quote like once a day or something,
Sure.
You can ask for help. You can challenge them.
Sure.
There's just so much space for creativity within the friendship.
Agreed. And I think it's important to have that creativity because you don't want the accountability relationship or the friendship to be solely based in just talking about addiction, right? And trying to help each other overcome. And we found this in group too when we were at Ave Maria, but just when we helped the women cultivate friendships with their accountability partner, I mean, some of them are like still super tight, Oh
my gosh, they're still like best friends to this day.
Yeah, they didn't like know each other coming into the group, and then they became accountability partners. And I remember assigning one time where I was like, all right, in the next 2 weeks, you need to go out on and do some, or like basically on a fun friend date with your accountability partner and not talk about porn.
Yep.
Or not talk about masturbation or whatever struggles you're helping each other overcome. And I remember two of them being like, we went shopping and we did this. And it was like awesome. It was awesome. And it was so restorative. So I think it's important to have that creativity and make sure your friendship is not being collapsed into just talking about issues.
Yes. My accountability buddy and I, we used to have like a regular weekly check-in time. Mm-hmm. And I started just feeling after like a year of this that our friendship was becoming more like accountability routine than organic friendship. And so we talked about it, and we actually like abolished the weekly check-in time. It served its purpose for a while.
Sure.
And then we had to change it. So you have to be ready for that within your accountability relationship.
Yeah, willingness
ready
to adapt. Yeah.
To switch things up, keep it fresh. Because you don't want to kill that friendship or prevent a friendship from growing where it may, if you became introduced as accountability and not friends.
Not even your needs change.
Exactly.
What you need changes.
Exactly.
And so like your example of like mirror selfies, it's like, okay, that was needed for that week.
Literally for a week.
While she established that habit, right?
Not forever.
Yeah. And then you have to be willing to adapt to the needs of your accountability partner and find somebody who's willing to adapt to your needs. So when you asked somebody to be your accountability partner, how did you ask?
I got lucky. She actually asked me.
Oh,
But let me tell you, she asked me because I was being very open about my past struggle with pornography. We were pretty good friends, and it came up for some reason when we were having dinner one night.
That's awesome.
And she told me that she had a problem with it. And I was actually the first person she ever told. Oh, wow. And I was so incredibly honored by this.
Powerful.
And we were already like pretty good friends. And at the time, I think my last accountability person was like phasing out for some reason. So we just talked about it, and we're like, yeah, let's do this together. And we're like 2 years going strong, and yeah, we're flexible, maybe in the future, like it will work better for us to have a different accountability, and that's okay.
Sure.
But it's worked out really well. It's just been a huge gift from God.
Well, there's a couple things you touched on there. Like oftentimes just sharing will lead to a natural accountability conversation. Because I think so many women get in their heads, they're like, I need an accountability partner, and how the hell do I ask anybody to do that? And it's, Matt Fraud made the point when I was talking with him about, like, you already know who you can trust. And I really liked that point. I thought that was very, very valid. It's like, we already know the friends that we can trust because we trust them with other things. But then also, I think we get in our heads that it has to be this very formal, buttoned up conversation of like, let me just reveal this thing to you. And oftentimes, and I can say that for me too, with the accountability I had over the past couple of years, it was a very organic conversation. It was like I shared, and this friend shared as well. And then I was the one who invited. I was like, well, if this is something that would help you, maybe we could keep each other accountable in this way, and just kind of how these manifestations are happening now. And she was like, yes, I would love that. And so I think there's, I think there's kind of this perception that finding accountability looks very awkward and formal, when typically it could be an organic conversation that occurs just with a friend.
That's why we always leave the option open when women come to group. We ask them if they have an accountability buddy, or if they would like to have one from the group. Everybody needs one, but it's up to them if they want to explore the possibility of someone they already know. Yeah, their own relationships. Or one from the group. There's not like one right answer to this.
No, and each accountability relationship looks so different. Like, I was asked a few weeks ago, one of our group members reached out, and she was like, okay, I'm starting a relationship with an accountability partner. What do I do? Like, how often do I check in? And I was like, that's kind of up to you. I think in the initial stages, something like a weekly check-in is advisable. It's a good idea. Even if it's like just quick text being like, how's it going? Yeah. Another thing that we recommend highly is the Victory app from LifeTeen. Yeah. The Victory app is an incredible tool. And that's an easy accountability tool. So if you haven't looked into the Victory app, maybe you and your accountability partner can use the Victory app. And Covenant Eyes is also an amazing accountability resource. And I think there's something about that with Covenant Eyes, like I know if I access this, a report, like I cannot stop that report from ending up in somebody else's inbox. Like, That's hard, man.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't guilt you into stopping. It just recognizes like this content that I'm taking in doesn't affect just me.
Yeah.
And that's what accountability does too, is like, again.
Yeah, I cannot recommend the Covenant Eyes accountability highly enough. And I know we're working on a partnership with them to get that service to more of our women, because that is a game changer.
Awesome. Yeah, they're awesome.
You know, and especially like you said, the email reports, because let's be honest, filters are kind of annoying. They often block things that they don't need to, and then fail to block things that they should have.
Right. And they have too many loopholes.
They seriously do. Like, what's the point of a filter?
You can get
we're all too smart for filters are for your 5-year-old.
Right.
No offense. No offense, Covenant Eyes. Maybe you're like a web developer or something, and pop-ups really are a problem for you in your occupation. But like the rest of us, like, just don't spend excessive time on Google, and you'll probably be okay. Probably shouldn't spend excessive time there anyway. I'm speaking to myself right now, by the way. I'm the queen of Google questions, and questions in general. But I lost my train of thought there. But yeah, that is a really important service, the email reports, because when you know that they're going to see it, and especially if your accountability person is someone also fighting the fight, that's going to be a powerful deterrent. Mutually
beneficial.
I would say, if ever possible, to choose an accountability buddy that's also battling related compulsions, because you know that it's going to bring them down if you have a setback, and you don't want to do that to them, even if you hate yourself in that moment, whatever, you're all up in shame world. Usually, as women, we don't hate our friends.
No, and ever. it's the recognition, again, kind of like we talked about in a couple previous episodes. This is like, my recovery matters to other people. My falls matter to other people. My victories matter to other people. It's not just me. Like, it's not just my skin in the game. When you have an accountability partner, you're like, okay, there's 2 skins in the game, you know? And then if you're in group accountability, it's like, there's a whole group of skins in the game, which is awesome. But let's move on to physical.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the body. So physical exercise is something that helped both you and I recover. And I think it's something that is necessary for each recovery journey. I don't want to fall into the error, which I think it is an error, of being like, if you're tempted to porn or tempted to watch porn, go take a walk. You know, like, I think that if you want to do that as one of your replacement behaviors, I think that's great. But I remember reading this book when my mom was teaching me about, you know, what sex was, right? When she was giving me the talk, and there was this particular Catholic book. I think it was called The Joyful Mystery of Life, or like something really, oh boy, you know, like, but I remember reading it, and I'm like 12, you know, and at one point it talks about, like, obviously this is directed towards boys, but it says, you know, like, some young men are tempted to express themselves in ways that are not healthy, or look at things that are not healthy. If a young man finds these temptations in himself, he should go run a mile. And that was the solution. Oh, wow. And number one, that's just awkward on so many levels. But number two, like, I think we can turn to physical activity kind of as the catch-all, and, you know, I want to be wary of that. But at the same time, there is a discipline and a sacrifice that comes with physical exercise that is inherently good for every human being, whether or not you're struggling with addiction.
Absolutely.
And that can look very different from person to person.
Absolutely.
But can you speak to how physical exercise has helped you in recovery?
First of all, okay, my background was not super athletic. Like, my parents forced me to do softball as a kid, but after that, like, into high school and middle school and everything, I was like the choir nerd, musician freak, like doing the plays and musicals and piano lessons, voice lessons, like 3 choirs outside of school. Yeah. You know, I really love music, and that's what I was getting into. Mm-hmm. That's what I was getting into. So I didn't really play like team sports or anything, and no one taught me how to work out as a result. It wasn't until I moved in with my super awesome Aunt Millie and my uncle that I started doing daily workouts with her. And so adding in, you want to talk about powerful, like adding in a social element to your exercise, I think is really, really good. Working out with your accountability buddy, or in the case of things like Zumba, working out with a group. And this totally altered my mental health for the better. Exercise is incredibly good for the brain.
Yes.
Like several studies show that those who have younger brains, like very healthy brains, are those who are working out regularly. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy, anything strenuous. Like I aim for like, 30, 40 minutes a day, like if possible, and then you miss some days, some weeks, and that's okay. The important thing is consistency.
Right.
And you never give up trying. And you also find things that are enjoyable for you, and you find goals for things you want to do that you really have to be in shape to do.
Sure.
Like walking the Camino in Spain a couple weeks ago. This would have been like difficult or impossible if I really wasn't strong enough to carry around a 50-liter backpack for 20 miles a day. Okay. Yes. So like there's some important things in your life that we want to be able to do and do well, and you need to stay in shape for. So some people just say, oh, exercise, it's not for me. I'm going to say something controversial here. I don't think that exists. I think that everybody can find something that's enjoyable, that's physical, and it's actually extremely important for you. And the other part, the Zumba relationship is really funny, because the first time that I tried a Zumba class was when I was in high school. I went with my mom, and I was ridiculously like self-conscious and had a horrible body image at the time. Right. And this instructor is calling out like booty pop, booty pop, booty pop. And I just remember being so horribly uncomfortable. And I was like, Zumba is satanic and I will never go back. Right. Yeah. And then, I got back into it because of my Aunt Millie, because she's Peruvian and she can dance like nobody's business. Yeah. And and I just fell in love with it. And some instructors are better than others, and I decided that I wanted to become one, actually, in order to be able to provide a version of it that is sort of, I guess you would say, more Catholic, and that doesn't like need to be like drenched in like hypersexuality, but is just like fun, joyful, and feminine. Yeah. It is feminine to dance. And there's a lot of moves in Zumba that are really feminine, and Zumba is a place where I go to express my femininity. And that's been really freeing. And where before the first time I went, I felt just like uncomfortable and awkward and like not happy in my own skin. These days, I just feel like confident, beautiful, dare I say, a little sexy, if I'm allowed to use that word. Yes. And also just like full of joy, even if I'm like messing up all the steps, that's actually good for you too, because you learned that, you don't have to be like a model or like, America's Next Top like dancer to just enjoy being like yourself, enjoy being a woman. So I'm a big fan of every woman finding a good exercise and also like things that make you feel like beautiful and feminine,
healthy and feminine. Yeah. I think because what you're getting at too, and I think this is an important point with these aspects, because we talked about it a bit with accountability, but I think it's very present when we're talking about physical exercise, is that these things in recovery are not just preventative measures. Like physical exercise is not just a preventative measure. It's like, okay, no, I need to work out instead of porn. It's like, no, I need to work out because it's good, you know? And for a lot of women that will depend on availability and state in life. I agree that saying exercise is not for me there's something for everyone. Even if you struggle with intense like chronic pain or disability, there are different things that are available to you according to your specific state. For some mom that may look like, taking her kids on, a nature walk or something, that may look like hitting the elliptical. Some people love dance classes like Zumba. That's a huge one. Mm-hmm. For some people that may look like, a good 45-minute weight lift session, and that
usually
can look...
it's a couple things.
Yeah. Tennis.
I enjoy like kickboxing, weightlifting, whatever. Right. Like, there's a couple of things that...
Yeah. I love running. That's a huge one for me. And during recovery, running was very, very helpful, because it was a challenge that I could set before myself of like, all right, I want to make it to this amount of mileage, or I want to run, a sprint for this long, or I want to just run in general for this long. And setting that goal before, me, and commanding my body and willing my body to meet that goal. And that's a positive habit to develop, but that's one that we're trying to develop as we fight sexual compulsion. Yes. Is like, I'm setting this goal and I am willing my body to meet this goal.
Yes. That's and huge. Even when your body goes like, I cannot possibly do that. What the heck are you talking about? And your mind goes, oh no, you can and you will.
Right.
I mean, that's so powerful. I never really felt confident and powerful, like truly as a whole, until I started working out regularly. Honestly, it completely changed my personality and my health for the better. Every woman should do that. Stacy emerged because because women at Ave were actually asking me to like help them to know a little bit how to work out. They just feel intimidated when they go to the workout room, the gym, if they're like me, and no one ever taught them.
Right.
No one ever taught me. You know who taught me? Beachbody videos. Right. No joke. Free weight exercises are thebomb.com. And Stacy will be there for you if you want to go to gym and just learn a little bit about that. Okay. It's really simple. So, but yeah, I think every woman deserves that time to feel good in her own skin and feel healthy. It's all about how you're feeling.
Yeah.
You don't get obsessed with like the weight or the shape. No. It's just, do you feel healthy? Yeah. If not,
do you feel like you're challenging yourself and meeting those goals and being able to develop more goals? I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's exercise, which, I mean, I agree. I would challenge every single woman to find, even just try once this week. If you don't already have, a workout that you enjoy or just physical activity that you enjoy in place, try to find it one time this week. Whether that's a run, again, like something like Zumba, or just a nice hike, or
try something new.
Yeah.
Go on an adventure. Do something new.
Whatever suits your fancy.
Try kickboxing. This is really good, especially if you work a job that stresses you out and makes you angry. Just get in there and pummel something.
There's that.
Seriously.
Yeah, there's that. I definitely had my times with, with boxing. But, okay, so talk about nutrition.
Yeah.
You have a lot to say about nutrition, so we have to make sure to stay.
I know this podcast is difficult to keep it short because I could literally talk about all the health things forever.
They each like deserve their own.
Okay, nutrition is important. And if you are challenged in your gut, your intestines, whatever, if you're feeling not great in your tum-tum, then you should also consider to like work with a professional. And
true.
And actually for myself, when I got more serious about my mental health, I discovered that nutritionists also specialize in things. And I found one that was specialized for mental health, and she helped me a lot, actually. But I think it's just important for everyone to be open and willing to try a couple of different ways of eating to find the one that suits them and their energy needs and their sensitivities if they have them. And the thing I would just caution about is to be careful in your relationship with food. And that if you are going to try very specific and hardcore protocols, especially if these protocols involve supplements, I'm talking like if you decide I really want to try like an antifungal diet, or I really want to try like GAPS, or I really, something specific like that, please work with a nutritionist or a dietitian.
Yeah, some of those are too intense to undergo.
I've tried to do it by myself before, and I actually found that it was making me dysfunctional in my relationship with food. And so that's my 2 cents about that. If you're going to do something that's quite difficult to undertake, if you're going to do an elimination diet or something like that, work with somebody that is going to guide you through that, because otherwise you may find yourself imposing rules and regulations on yourself that are not helpful anymore.
Well, I think what you're getting at is something I really wanted to address in this episode, is because I think that pertains to fasting as well.
Absolutely.
Fasting is an incredible spiritual practice. And a couple times a year, it's required of Catholics. It's required of adult Catholics to fast during, 2 particular days in Lent. But I don't always recommend, because some people are like, oh, fasting. I don't always recommend fasting as a spiritual practice or a physical practice when you're trying to discipline yourself when dealing with addiction. Because I think I think we can fall into a mindset of, let me deprive myself of many things I enjoy, and then my body will somehow adapt and I will not need them anymore. And that's just not physiologically how we work, right? And so I think we have to avoid, when we are trying to root out sexual compulsion, when we're trying to discipline ourselves, because discipline is good. I think fasting can be useful in like, okay, I'm going to deny my body the satisfaction of a glass of wine whenever I want one. I'm going to designate 1 or 2 days a week where I will allow myself to have a glass of wine, right? It's not about eliminating the thing. It's establishing a healthy relationship with the thing. And obviously with porn, there is no healthy relationship except not looking at it, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different than food. And
But
I think we have to remember
different.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so saying like, I'm going to impose these strict fasts on myself until porn is no more, you're dealing with 2 different parts of yourself, you know, like and again, I think establishing a healthy relationship with food and sweets and like other treats, you know, in our life, I think that's important. Or, you know, media consumption is another one that it's good to establish a good relationship with and perhaps fast a little from when you're trying to recover from porn addiction. It's like, yeah, okay, I will only allow myself to watch movies or TV shows in the company of other people. I highly recommend that, because, you know, if a sex scene pops up in a movie or a TV show and you're watching it by yourself, you're probably going to watch it if you're an addict, you know, or if you're trying to recover, that's going to be a very difficult situation to put yourself in. If it happens in a group setting, you can easily be prevented from watching it unless you're in a group of people that is okay watching that in a group, in which case you should probably question the group of people you're hanging out with. However, I think it's important not to deprive ourselves of, you know, of all the things that we love and just wait for pornography to not be a problem anymore. You know, I think we're swinging to the opposite side of the spectrum. Instead, we need to be establishing a healthy relationship with the things we love. And so I think it's important to examine, what is my relationship with food? What is my relationship with media and sweets and alcohol and things like that? And instead of just getting rid of them because you enjoy them, instead discipline them. Like you're disciplining your body and working out. Discipline.
But even with the working out, the goal is to be healthy, to
balanced.
be happy.
Yeah. It's not to
eliminate. To punish yourself. Yeah, exactly. We're not about punishing yourself.
No.
You know, you set the boundaries in your life so that you can be happy.
Yeah. And
that's what it's about.
The role of mortification, like in the church, is just continually, I think, something I reflect on and think about. But yeah, and like mortifying the flesh and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But I think when it comes to pornography, again, it's, if you
need
starve,
to be gentle with yourself.
You have to be compassionate, because if you starve all those other spaces of like the things you enjoy, you know, if you absolutely starve yourself, then it actually makes it much easier to obey the compulsion to pornography, you know, like, because pornography is an excess. It is a compulsion. It is like, it's a saturation and something that you should not be saturated in. And so if you completely deprive yourself of all pleasures, then it's much easier to just try to fill your cup in one instant.
Yes, you have to replace the intrinsic evil.
Still fill your
with
cup.
True goods.
Yes, fill your cup with something good, healthy.
You can't just eliminate every good from your life and expect it to work out.
And I think for women, this manifests differently than for men, right? Mm-hmm. Like I know a lot of men who have achieved lasting freedom through Exodus 90, right? Yeah. And Exodus 90 is powerful.
Yeah.
But I also have known some men who are heavily addicted, where Exodus 90 has made the problem worse. And that's obviously not the majority of men who engage in Exodus. But like I remember when I started Pure in Heart at Ave, I was like, we're going to do something like Exodus. And then it was like, that was brought into question, thank God, by the women around me. They're like, are you sure you want to do Exodus? And I'm super grateful for that, because I think that would have been an extreme that women, you know, don't need. And a lot of women do need to learn that self-compassion and that self-care.
I think that where there is mental illness present, which frequently is with porn addiction, then you need that spirit of gentility.
Yeah. Now,
I will say, as someone who has already come through a lot of the counseling and the recovery, now sometimes exercise is the best tool in my arsenal when I'm feeling a temptation. It is the best choice for me to go to the gym and just have a really, really hard workout. Like really like hold that plank for 60 more seconds, But at the time when I first began my journey and I was dealing with a lot of like mental, emotional turmoil, would that approach have worked? Definitely not.
Yes.
Definitely
same.
not. That was something
Amen.
that over time, now it's like a good option for me. So it just depends on what's the cause of your relationship with porn, I think.
Well, and I think there's also some things work proximately, but not long term.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's kind of what you're getting at too, is like,
a lot of the time let me be more specific. When it's that special time of the month when your body really wants you to get pregnant, ladies, go to the gym, seriously hold that 60-second plank, get like real sweaty, and when you come home you're gonna feel a lot better.
Yeah, no, I think that's I think you're like, touching on important things. Yeah. Or I mean, ovulation is naturally a time where we crave intimacy.
Yep.
And so spend that time in, meaningful conversations with people you love. Set a date with, a friend during that time. That's the thing, is like we want ahead.
That's why you have to chart your cycle.
We don't want to suppress. We want to
express.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And like that's the thing, is we're trying to reroute where our expressions go. But oh my gosh, I had a point. Oh, yes. Again, like proximate versus long term. Like, I know in the moment I found a lot of value, especially when I went cold turkey, and then the temptations afterward. I would get down and do push-ups or sit-ups or a plank or something on my floor if I was being tempted. And disciplining my body in that moment, being like, no body, you will do something that you don't really want to do right now. That like, no, I didn't want to do push-ups or sit-ups, but you're going to do something that you don't want to do right now. And that did help, not give in to the compulsion. I know a lot of women who have also done cold showers. I've done that on occasion as well.
Yeah.
I had one friend who literally, like if she was experiencing lust, she would throw herself in a cold shower as immediately as possible, clothes on, the whole bit. She would just like be like, all right, turn on the shower and hop in.
That's
cool. And that helped her. Right. And, for some women, that's not what you need. But having something like a little more fasting, or, like a little more disciplinary measure right there to grab in that proximate situation. If it's like, all right, this is my emergency break. Here we go. I think that can be a good role of something a little more mortifying, obviously in a lighter sense than what a lot of church history says mortification is, but it's pulling that emergency break.
You don't need to jump into the rose bush, the thorn bush, but
at Saint Benedict.
Yeah.
But I mean,
but have
Saint
something.
Benedict. Or, you got Thomas Aquinas chasing around a prostitute with a poker, like with a firebrand thing. He's like, he's going to light this one.
Fun to me. I would love to replace my temptation chasing someone around with a poker.
I know, right?
Sounds like fun.
That sounds better, but anything's better. But yeah, I think it's so important to have what we're talking about is the gentleness and the compassion with yourself, and recognizing in these physical and mental health realms, having such compassion towards your younger self who started engaging in these behaviors, having compassion towards the self that, was 5 minutes ago and wanted this. It's like, okay, hey, you wanted this, but you're not steering the ship. And Sister Miriam James Heidland talks about that all the time. She has like anything she says about healing, I like lay on the floor and cry. I'm like, that's it. That's it right there with open hands. But she has this awesome episode of her Abiding Together podcast where she talked about her own healing with some childhood wounds, and she's very vocal about it, but she just beautifully says how oftentimes, not giving in to prior habits or dispositions are so much of healing, and I think this applies to porn recovery, is like cradling your younger self, like cradling, and even that self 5 minutes ago, cradling yourself like in the face, right? And just being like, hey, you're loved, you're known, but you are not steering the ship right now. Mm-hmm. Like healthy, my healthy self is steering the ship. Yeah. And the 12-year-old who fell to pornography is not steering the ship. Or, the desperate woman in college is not steering the ship. The me 5 minutes ago who fell into a moment of insecurity, you're not steering the ship. The beloved daughter of God who knows that about herself, she is steering the ship right now. Mm-hmm. And just having that compassion towards, yourself when you start and those wounded spaces that we're never going to completely get rid of until heaven, but like having compassion towards them and being gentle towards them, I think is super important.
Yeah.
Okay, let's conclude with a little bit on spirit while we have a little bit more time. Just practical spiritual aspects of recovery. Spiritual direction is the first on our list. So talk about your relationship with spiritual direction in recovery.
Yeah, well, it hasn't been a constant thing in my life.
Yeah.
But the influence of a couple priests and religious over the years have definitely shaped my spiritual life for the better, and definitely like helped me in recovery. Yeah, it's interesting for me. I really like started with the counseling, got more serious about the physical things when I was about 20. And then as a result, almost like as a result of just this incredible success from all of it, I mean, I was leagues different than I was before.
Yeah.
And there's another factor to that story we can maybe talk about a different time. Brain injury. But as a result of that, my faith in God was like really renewed. It was really
that's powerful,
revitalized. And I realized that I had been relating to God almost like in a two-dimensional way for many years. You know, I was a cradle Catholic, and my love of sacred music over the years has really like drawn me into like reverence and awe and respect for God.
Yeah.
But until I was more like mentally, emotionally where I should be, I was afraid to allow myself to be angry at God, or with God for all of the suffering that had been in my life. And when I began to relate to God really, truly as he is a real person, and to say what I needed to say and feel my feelings with him, things just changed drastically for the better. And oftentimes, like, spiritual directors over the years helped me with this. They were the ones that clued me in a little bit to the fact that, well, why don't you go to the chapel and tell God you're angry at him? You know?
Yeah.
Why don't you, just be honest with God about how you're feeling. And even in my dysfunction, helping me to understand that there were legitimate, like, psychosocial reasons at play. Yeah. Even though, and this came from a very wise priest, that I was seeing for spiritual direction, that even though, yes, what I did was a sin, that my, like, psyche and my whole life are also wrapped up into that. And that God sees that, and that if I take the time to understand, what was it that motivated me in this sin, and what was it that brought me to it, and how can I have more freedom? Taking the time to consider those things with a trusted priest or religious, it's life-changing. Yes. Because they really know and understand God in such a deep and intimate way. Yep. And can bring the true essence of who he is into your life more. Yeah. That's been my experience over the years. So
I agree. I think, I've had an on and off relationship with spiritual direction, but the same thing, like, my spiritual director towards the end of college, at Ave, anything. And he knew I was running Pure in Heart at the same time. So he knew my testimony, and also just a lot of things that are just residual effects that I was still struggling with. And sometimes because I struggled or have struggled in the past deeply with scrupulosity, when I would present him with, like, I think I'm being unchaste in this way, or I think I'm being impure in this way. Sometimes he would just look at me and laugh. He'd be like, like, Rachel, like, why are you just up in your own business so much? Like, go out and live, and he was so good at almost like breaking me out of just the fear that pornography had, left in my life. And so I attribute a lot of freedom from just that scrupulosity and that fear to him, which is awesome. But I mean, daily prayer also is huge. We have that on the list, and you and I both, are practicing Catholics, hopefully devout, but mostly practicing because we're all supposed to be practicing, but like, and can attest to what daily prayer does. Because when we're talking about a prayer life, a lot of people have not yet taken the steps to cultivate daily prayer. Yeah. And I think that is incredibly crucial for recovery. Yeah. And prayer, with spiritual directions and also with the sacraments, frequent, visits to the confessional, it's huge. And seeing it as not a box to check, but seeing it as a place to encounter the mercy of God and see him face to face. I would encourage anybody who's confessing sexual sin. I know in the era of COVID, it's a little bit different, but in any confession, actually, I would encourage face-to-face confession. That was actually very impactful for me, is when I had to face the priest and say, I looked at pornography or whatever, and looking in his eyes. And so, I mean, sometimes like there were priests who reduced me to tears with just the look of love that they gave me. Oh. And then some women have had extremely negative experiences in the confessional, and I have as well. And so again, it's that kind of like we talked about with accountability partners. If you have a negative experience, either you can let it own you, or you can own it and trust and try again. Yeah. And acknowledge the pain that caused you, hand it over to Jesus, and try again. And but I think visits to the confessional and daily prayer, frequent reception of the sacraments, but I mean, daily prayer, again, it's kind of like physical exercise. A particular thing is not going to be everybody's bread and butter. Like, I have some friends who, it's the rosary. Like, the rosary is their thing, and they meditate so well when they're praying the rosary. The rosary is so hard for me. I have such a hard time praying it. Doesn't mean I don't need to try, but it means maybe it shouldn't be the basis of my daily connection with God, right? And because prayer is supposed to be sacrifice, but it's also supposed to be connection. So how do I find myself best offering myself to God and receiving what he has to say to me and the direction he has to give me and the growth he wants taking place in me? And that's going to look different for every person. Some people it's mental prayer. Some people it's scripture reflection and journaling. Some people it is actually while you're exercising. I have a friend she says that her best conversations with God happen on runs. Wow. So she goes on runs every day. And I'm like, well, good. I wish that were me, so that I would run every day. But I think, gosh.
You know what I think when I'm running?
What?
Why am I running? Oh. I hate running. I hate running so much. And I actually do it as a prayer for my accountability partner.
That's wonderful.
But my prayer sounds more like, dear God, when will I reach a mile?
Free me. Yeah.
Yeah. Free me from this treadmill.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the beginning of running, I don't like it. And then in the middle, I love it. And then towards the end, I'm like, and you feel super powerful. So I do like running a lot. But just, finding the space where you feel like you can be most yourself with God is super important. Some women, it's music. That's huge.
Oh, it's a big one for me.
Yeah, I'm a big music gal too. Yeah. I like to listen to music while I pray, at least to begin.
Yeah, I often have this moment, sometimes during Mass and sometimes when I should be like praying the rosary, where instead something comes into my mind and it reminds me of a song that I've sung in a choir. A very beautiful, like lush, prayerful song. And instead of fighting it, these days I stick with it, and I reflect on the song as it's playing in my mind. And like this is like one way that I love to pray. And
I like that.
And some ways, like sometimes you fight these things because you think to yourself, like, I should be thinking about this while I'm in Mass, or I should be doing this while I'm praying. But leave room for the Holy Spirit and see what bears fruit in your spiritual life. Yes. And that's your guide.
Yes.
And that's your guide. Yes. As long as you're also trying many different things and
don't get stuck in a routine because it's comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like knowing how my mind learns, like how I take in information is also like, that was helpful. Like the types of intelligences, like some people are kinetic learners, so they learn through, physical interaction with the object of their learning. So that could be somebody who runs, like that could be what's going on. Is there a kinetic
right?
learner?
Or maybe you work and pray. I often knock out a rosary while I'm like doing the dishes.
Yeah, that's
this is very like cathartic for me, because otherwise I often would find myself thinking about really stupid things while I'm doing the dishes, things that I don't need to be thinking about, sometimes things that I like shouldn't be thinking about, comparisons, or like what am I going to do later today, or obsessing about something. When I catch myself like that, I'm like, okay, it's mental solo rosary time.
Yeah. No, and
you know,
I think
ora et labora. Pray and work.
That's incredible self-awareness, but I think that is kind of like kinetic. And I'm a linguistic learner, so I learn by speaking and by writing and reading. So I don't learn best in lecture. I learn best by reading and repeating the material that I'm learning. So translating that to my spiritual life, I was like, okay, I'm going to employ the practice of spiritual reading and writing. So my prayer life depends heavily upon scripture reading, spiritual reading. So I always have a spiritual classic going, or just a spiritual book of some sort. So I read a little bit of scripture, read some of that book, maybe 10 pages typically, and then journal. And usually there's a piece from one or both of those that's applying to, you know, what I think the Holy Spirit is leading me to pray about and speak with him about. But sometimes I have music on in the background, sometimes I don't. And that's a prayer routine that I've found is super helpful for my type of intelligence. So there's a quote that I love. It's from just a little monk. I can't remember what his name is. Brother, monk. Oh geez. It's not Brother Lawrence, but it's a different little monk where he says, he said, pray as you can, not as you can't. You know, he put it very simply. And I think when we're in recovery, you know, and again, we're in that space of trying to have more mercy and compassion on ourselves. We have to do that in the spiritual realm as well. Yeah. Have compassion on the way you pray. God loves the way you pray. Yeah. Chill your pants. Like, you don't.
There's not one perfect recipe. You do
not need to be Teresa
Spiritual
right
comparison and spiritual perfectionism are so real.
Can't even get into that because we're literally we could spend an hour.
Yeah, but don't fall prey to that. Yeah, find the way that works for you. And I want to say something about confession too, that I heard. I don't remember where I heard this, but I heard it recommended for someone undergoing this difficulty with sexual compulsion. That think about how frequently it is that you have this behavior in your week. Maybe it's like I'm having it like 3 times a week these days or something, or like once a week. And it was recommended to me that you would go to confession just slightly more frequently than you have the problem.
Oh, interesting.
Not because we're trying to be free always in our soul of this stain, but rather so that you could begin to unpack what are the others, like smaller vices and habits and struggles
that could be contributing,
that have led you into this greater sin. Yeah. Because until you start to unpack those, then you won't find freedom or recovery. You know, if every single trip to the confessional is about, I did it again. I watched pornography again. I masturbated again. Then where's the time and the space and reflection going to be for what are the things that have lead you into it?
Wow, I really like that. I've never heard that, but that's such a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I can't for the life of me remember where I heard this, but it really struck me.
That's a hot take.
And I think it's really true. And that might be very difficult at the beginning of recovery if you're having the behavior frequently. But something to keep in mind as you go along, if it's possible.
Well, and I think we definitely treat confession as like, especially when we fall into pornography and masturbation, which are mortal sins according to the church. Yeah. That's a tough one. But also we can talk about the criteria for mortal sin, which is it has to be a grave matter, which pornography and masturbation both are. Have to do it knowingly, knowing it's a grave matter, and willingly. Yeah. And addiction can affect the will. Like that's a huge theological conversation. Yeah. But you want to take these things to confession as quickly as possible. But here's a hot take I have that I may get shot down for, but and maybe I'm dead wrong. But I think there are a couple times where I did not make it to confession before Sunday Mass, right? And say it happened Saturday night, and then Sunday morning I go to Mass, right? And in those moments, because what Scripture and what the church instructs us to do is, yes, go to confession as quickly as possible for the sake of your soul, so that a mortal sin is not affecting your soul. But I think we lose that and we take, I need to be able to receive the Eucharist again as quickly as possible. When receiving the Eucharist, it is not like as many Eucharists as I get in my body, that's how holy I am, right? It goes so much deeper than that. It's so much more mysterious. And the goal of Mass is not to receive the Eucharist. The goal of Mass is to worship the Eucharist. And you can still do that with this, affecting you. And I think actually the couple Masses that I can recall where I had not made it to confession yet and could not receive, it created such a pure contrition in me, watching everybody else receive and then reflecting and sitting there and having conversations with the Lord about why I wasn't receiving the Eucharist today. It filled me with a true remorse that I thought was an extremely helpful spiritual step for me.
Absolutely.
And so I'm not recommending you willfully don't go to the confessional, but I'm saying maybe reorient how you're seeing reception of the Eucharist. Like, is my goal, again, to receive the Eucharist as quickly as possible, or is it to have true contrition? And we develop true contrition in different ways, but that's kind of a way that I developed it. And again, I may get some flack for that. But I'm not recommending avoid the confessional. I'm just recommending think about your relationship to the Eucharist.
That's super clear, Rachel, and it makes a lot of sense. And I've had similar experiences. The handful of times where I really couldn't, in good conscience, receive the Eucharist,
and that happens. It
was very sad, and it was helpful.
And you longed for him. Yeah,
I learned from it.
Absolutely. So practically speaking, as we conclude, I think laying out mind, body, spirit as the different categories of struggle, it's easy for us to recommend one in each, right? So in mind, we can challenge you, if you haven't considered counseling or therapeutic help for your struggles, whether that's, mental health or addiction or both, or an addiction that could be, caused by a mental health issue that you haven't recognized yet or haven't gotten the chance to address yet. We encourage you to at least research counseling this week. At least maybe find a practice near you, find a therapist near you, find a therapist who will do telehealth. Just start researching maybe some solutions to that. Or for your mind, find an accountability partner. Start those accountability conversations if you haven't already. Or just pray about who might be a good fit. Whether that's somebody in your Magdala group or somebody in your everyday life.
Or if you already have all those things running or done.
Good for you. You've won.
My daily goal in general is to have one meaningful conversation per day with someone that I care about. It's so simple.
That's a good word.
And truly, it changes your social life and your mental life for the better.
That's a good word.
So, and it's not just a given anymore in this culture where we're isolated and we don't, always have, I've given up the fantasy of the perfect social life, but at least every day to have one meaningful conversation.
I love that.
And even if you can't afford therapy right now, or even if you're still parsing out the accountability situation, don't give up. Have one meaningful conversation per day.
Yeah, and take that first step towards those things. We don't have to secure a therapist this week or an accountability partner, but take a step. And then body, we kind of said, challenge yourself. Challenge yourself to find a form of physical exercise you enjoy. And then when it comes to your relationship with food, I think a practical challenge this week is pick something that you enjoy and designate a time for it. Designate a day. I think alcohol is an easy one to do this with. But go enjoy that thing in a way that is healthy and good. Say, I'm going to go out for drinks with my boyfriend. I'm going to go out for drinks with a friend. Yeah. I'm going to bake cookies with my daughter.
Give yourself something to look forward to.
Associate that with a healthy
have the joy of it.
Yeah, exactly. Enjoy the pleasure of it in a way that is pleasurable and healthy and ordered. And maybe reorient kind of our associations with pleasure. And then in spirit, what would you recommend for spirit? I'd love to hear.
Oh, well, if you already kind of know what floats your boat with the spiritual life, then, do that. And if not, try something different. Try a chaplet of divine mercy, or ooh, try a chaplet of healing. And maybe I can get the link to this in the podcast. This is a special new prayer. This is a special new prayer that my dad and I are helping to get out to people. And it's a beautiful prayer. It's like a chaplet of mercy, but it's a chaplet of healing. This is perfect for this issue. Same length, doesn't take much time, or read the scripture of the day for the mass, or try something different, try something new. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that's us getting practical for an entire
episode. It's going to be a lengthy one, but hey, I know that this is one that everyone really wanted. So hopefully.
Yes. We've been asked a lot for practical tips, and we'll probably revisit the conversation again and I love revisiting this conversation with multiple people because everybody has different practical tips. So we'll probably hit this up again on the podcast. But if you like this episode, follow, subscribe, whatever the button looks like, share with a friend who you think might be in need. Patreon also is our location for just donors, but it also allows you unique access to different podcast episodes. We do book studies for our patrons. We're in the middle of our 4 Loves book study right now. And just other fun stuff when we create merch. That's where the merch discounts will be. The merch. But it's incoming. So consider supporting us financially on Patreon. The link is in the show description. But also, please pray for us, as we will be praying for you. And we will catch you soon.
Peace out, Girl Scouts.
Thanks for joining the conversation today on the Magdala podcast. If you want to learn more, join a support group with other women on the journey, or find more content, visit magdalaministries.org. If you want to continue to be a part of the conversation, like, subscribe, and share this podcast. But most importantly, wherever you are in the journey of healing, know that you're not alone and you don't have to hide anymore. We're excited to welcome you to the table next time. God bless.